Welcome to In the News for April the 4th, 2025. I am Brett Burney from appsandlaw.com.
And I am Jeff Richardson from iPhone JD, and we are live here in Chicago.
Live from ABA Tech Show in Chicago. So for those of you that may not know, ABA Tech Show is a conference, actually that's really where Jeff and I first started getting to know each other very well. We presented together at this conference, and so it's sort of a little bit of a homecoming. It's actually the 40th anniversary of this conference, and we thought, well, we're going to be here on Friday, April the 4th. We might as well try to record an episode of the podcast, which I just think is really fantastic. We're actually in the big, huge, cavernous exhibit hall right now.
Yes.
There's people you can probably hear, people walking by. Our sound's a little bit different, but we're thrilled to be here.
We are at the McCormick Center.
The McCormick, well, it's the McCormick Place, I think, in Lakeside. Anyway, it's the McCormick Convention Center in Chicago. It's like south of Soldier Field, but it's huge. This place
Number
is
one,
humongous.
it's huge. It's also
they have their own zip code, I think.
It's also cool because the exhibit hall is so much big and bright, but when you walk to the end of the exhibit hall, there's windows, and you look out and you see
the skyline. It's great,
and the lake, and it's really, really pretty, and so it's nice. And I love Chicago. Chicago's a cool city, and there's so many cool things about it. I also think it's interesting. This is the 40th anniversary of the American Bar Association Tech Show. So when you think back, that would be what, 1985, 86, whatever it was. The mid 1980s. I mean, I was enjoying technology in the 1980s as much as I do today. Of course, I was in high school.
It's a little different.
So it's a little different, and I wasn't really paying too much attention to what attorneys were using. But that's just sort of funny. So it's a lot of technology that has come out. I mean, you think back in the 1980s. I mean, there was still Apple IIs and the earliest PC.
Yeah, and I'm trying to remember because we've talked about this several times. Like my first computer, it was a Radio Shack TRS-80, fondly known as the Trash 80. But what was that? Would that have been? My goodness. I mean, I'm trying to remember now. It could have even been like 83, something like that. I mean, it was a long time ago. But I mean, I remember I would save my programs, of course, in BASIC. It was like a Radio Shack audio cassette recorder, and it was cassette tapes that I was using. I mean, that's the technology we were doing 40 years ago.
I had a Commodore 64, but it was connected to a printer made by Smith Corona, the typewriter.
Oh my goodness!
Which meant that it wasn't a dot matrix. It actually had like a typewriter thing in it. But what it meant is that I could use word processors back in the day when teachers certainly didn't even know what a word processor was, which meant that my papers were perfect. There were no typos because the computer, checked all that. And when I printed them out, they were perfect. And it was really nice. And I used that in high school. I used that into my freshman year of college. So we've come a long way. But I just think it's sort of funny that with Tech Show, in fact, tonight there's going to be a party that has a 1980s theme. I did not bring any 80s clothes. Perhaps I should have brought, I should have brought my Jane Fonda workout tape or something like that. I forgot to do so.
I'm confident there will be plenty of that tonight. I almost brought my little headband with a mullet on the back, which would have gone well. But anyway, there's going to be plenty of fun tonight on there.
Indeed.
Okay, well, I tell you what, we'll get back to some Tech Show fun and some sessions that we've been doing because both of us have been talking. Your session yesterday with the Vision Pro was amazing. But why don't we talk about quickly some of the news that actually came out, because even though we're here, you still had a post today, Jeff, which is amazing because a big release, we talked about this last week, was iOS 18.4. And there were several stories that you linked to today, which are great. I mean, a lot of this, I don't think anything was a surprise because we've been talking about this for the last couple of weeks, but it's finally out. I think right before I left, maybe 2 or 3 days ago, I updated my phone, my iPad, even my Mac, and I don't know the watch. We'll come to the watch in just a moment because you were talking about it was there and not there and then back there. But let's talk about iOS 18.4 first.
Sure. I mean, so many features. Just to pick one to start with, Apple News Plus has been updated. It now has a food section, and it's really, really nice.
It actually is. I was laughing about it, but it's nice.
No, I had not installed the beta before on my iPhone or my iPad. So when it came out on Monday, that was the first time I had looked at it. And it's a beautiful, as you would expect from Apple, right? It's a beautiful interface. You can look at the recipes. It's got the ingredients on the left. It's got the instructions on the right. And it even have a mode that you can tap a button and you can see a full screen list of just your ingredients where you can tap through things so that if you're grocery shopping, you can tap that, I bought the celery, I bought the carrots, whatever it is that you need. And then there's also a second mode that has, if you don't want to just look at one big long list of the directions for cooking, it will show you step by step, like whatever the first step in cooking is, that's on the screen. and then you tap, and then it shows the next step. So you can have your iPad, or I guess your iPhone with the smaller screen, there in your kitchen as you're following through the steps to cook. And when I look at this, of course you can use it on an iPad and it would be fantastic for that, but it makes you think of this mythical device that supposedly Apple has in development that would be like
You're
the
still hopeful.
HomePod with a screen that would live in your kitchen and would give you your directions for cooking. And so that's like the interface, which obviously Apple is responsible for. But a cooking app is only good as the content. And again, I don't, I eat food, I don't cook food, but my wife's an excellent chef, and she,
Yes,
finds
indeed.
recipes on the internet all the time. And the sources that they come through, I don't have the list in front of me right now, but it's like all of these very well-known cooking sources.
Oh, really? Okay.
So
I
they're
didn't know
real
that.
recipes that, and in fact, one of them I was looking at that was, it was actually a cocktail recipe, not a food recipe, but it said
You can
this
cook
actually,
cocktails. You're good at that.
that's the extent of my cooking, is mixing a good cocktail. And it said, this came from, I don't know, eating well, like 8 years ago or something like that. But I'm like, well, that's fine, because a cocktail that was published 8 years ago is just as good as one I make today. So the content looks really good, and again, that's just one feature. And that's just one other thing, though, is just fascinating. And I put this in my post today. Apple News Plus, when it first started out, people were like, it's a big deal. But now they've got great sources of news. They've got the game section. They've got the food section. They've got sports. In many cities, they have local news. You can find whatever topic is of interest to you, and you can favorite it so that, like, there's a section of the newspaper devoted to X topic,
Yes,
whatever, like if
absolutely.
you're interested in Apple, for example, Apple News, or if you're interested in, running, you can have a running news section. And so it's actually come along, and that's just one of the features. I mean, if that was the only thing that was new, that would be pretty cool. They have new features for photos. Some of these are sort of housekeeping features, but they there's a lot of, like, you can now reorder things in utilities, and some filters that were in one part are now in another. It's sort of like you're making it all a little more, working together and cohesive. Trying to think of what is the, oftentimes, Brett, the big thing, we always joke that when Apple has an update with new emoji, that means that they think it's ready for prime time. But I have to admit, I'm looking at a picture right now of the new emoji.
The emojis I see.
Have we gotten to the point where it doesn't matter anymore? Because, like, I guess maybe I would use the face with bags under the eyes. Goodness knows I felt that way on a Monday morning sometimes. But none of these strike me as, changing my life that much.
Well, I don't know. You have a radish emoji now.
How often do you need a radish emoji?
Well, it wasn't until they released it, maybe, that I realized how often I need a radish emoji. I think the bags under their eyes is something a lot of people will see. But, I just got to say, I think I've mentioned this a couple of times. I've done some research on this and talking about it, from my aspect, from e-discovery and collecting. Like, there's a whole process that people go through. Like, all of these have to be approved. I know we laugh at it, but there's this whole lengthy process that they go through, and people go back and forth, and how it's created. And even to the point where some of these now are created from, like, multiple different emojis, and they kind of string them together. Anyway, it's just fascinating if you've ever want to go down into the world of emoji.
We should say that
Emojipedia is a good place.
Apple does not pick these emojis.
No, exactly.
The emojis are picked by a consortium.
It's the
what
Unicode.
Apple
That's right.
They have their graphical artists come up with their version of the emoji, and that's why the emoji looks a little different on an iPhone than an Android than other apps that have their own built-in messaging features.
It is. It's a very detailed radish, I have to say. It's very nice.
So, but anyway, for those of you who, you're text messaging with your spouse, the one thing you were missing was a radish.
Well,
you're gonna love this.
The thing is, here's the thing: people will download it, they'll send it, and if you haven't updated, and you receive one of these, it won't show correctly.
Exactly.
And so, to your point, like, that's why Apple, I think, encourages, it's like, hey, you need to update, because if somebody's going to send, they're going to try to send the bags under the eyes. If you haven't updated, you're not going to see the emoji in the way that it's meant to be seen.
Yeah.
And so you feel the peer pressure to update as well. I think it's brilliant.
It makes sense. They've also updated CarPlay, which I love all the time. But the big updates are things that I cannot use. Because the big update is, if you have one of these newer cars and have the big screen and you got the space for it, you can now have 3 rows of apps instead of 2.
Right.
I just have an old Honda Accord that I drive with a small little screen. There ain't space for 3 rows of apps. There's barely space for the 2 rows of apps that we have right now. So other things like that. There's also there was an update, something about sports. I don't see it listed on this particular article, but something about sports scores can be shown in CarPlay too.
Oh, really?
I haven't had a chance
to.
I don't have anything in front of me on that. So, but I mean, there again, it's a 0.1 update, so you're not going to expect that much.
That's right.
But this 0.4 update has a lot more features than I expected. One that's sort of personal to me is, I love my Vision Pro, and you can now have it that there's an app on the iPhone or on the iPad that is a Vision Pro app, much like you have an Apple Watch app.
Oh,
And what's
okay.
cool about it is, first of all, I can open up the app, and even if I haven't looked at my Vision Pro, it will show me in the app, here's like new immersive videos from Apple.
Right.
So like I will know, oh, that makes me want to go pull out my Vision Pro and put it on. But what I really like about the app is it is now so much easier if you want to share your Vision Pro with someone else. Like oftentimes I'll see a cool video and my son, he wants to see it because he loves this stuff too. He has a Quest, what do they call it? The Quest.
That's the Meta.
Yeah, the Meta Quest version of it. So
Orbit or
he's
something,
very
yeah.
comfortable with virtual reality and augmented reality, but of course he doesn't have the the higher quality one like I do.
Right.
So there's a cool video, and I love it with this app because with the app I can just from the app say, okay, here you go, son. You have the ability to do it. I can see on my screen what he's looking at. The one thing that the Vision Pro has always done is when you're watching content that's copyrighted, which is pretty much all content, it won't AirPlay that as to my iPhone. And so what I'll do is I have to sort of like disconnect, and then he can see the video and I can't see it. But what did not exist before Monday of this week is now when he's done watching the video and goes back to the interface, I can just tap a button and I can once again help him again on the iPhone and say, okay, now swipe to the left, swipe to the right. So it's without getting into the weeds, suffice it to say, it's just so much easier to share your Vision Pro, and that's all because of this app. So, and that's just the changes for the iPhone. Really, really nice stuff.
I'm going to get into it because I want to get to a really important one. But just real quick, we talked about this just a little bit last week that I am so happy. 18.4 now gives me visual intelligence on my iPhone 15 Pro, which you already have on your 16 Pro. That came built in, but we didn't have access to it. And so now I have the ability, if I swipe into my control center here, it's already in here that I can go into this visual intelligence. And I was watching some video where like, just amazing the power that you've had. I don't know, you said you didn't use it. You haven't used it all that much.
That often. It is cool though that you can point, your camera at something, and it will use AI to tell you what it is. I still see it. I mean, number one, you can use it today. That's all great. What I am excited about this technology is I think it is a portal into the future, because we're going to get to the point, whether it's a future version of the Vision Pro, which is the size of your glasses, or there's rumors that Apple might change AirPods to maybe put some sort of little camera on it, not so that you'll be like recording people as you're walking around with your AirPods, but so the AirPod can have a sense of the world around you. And if the AirPod itself could recognize things, Meta currently sells the Ray-Ban Wayfarer glasses, which they have the ability while you're wearing the Meta glasses. I haven't worn one yet myself, but as I've heard it described, if I am looking at a tree, I can say, hey, Meta, or whatever it is, what is this object? And it will say that is an elm tree or whatever it is. But the idea is, I think we're moving into the world where our technology will have more of a sense of what's around us. And so to do that, you need to be able to recognize things and use AI. So what's important about this technology is Apple thinks it's developed enough to start shipping it, but I'm far more excited to see what are they doing with, what is the more mature version of this technology 5 years, 10 years and down the road. So it's fun stuff. So I'm glad that you'll have a chance to use it now
finally.
And see what you think.
I get it on my 15 Pro. And that came automatic in my control center. But something else that I added to my control center today was, I think it's so small, but I'm really enjoying my brand new ambient music. I call it my spa music. But this morning I turned it on. We talked about this last week, and I enjoyed it immensely. I didn't think that I would. I feel like I'm getting a facial or something, or like a foot rub when I'm listening to this. But it's just so nice to have it on. This was a brand new. It's really an app, is what I really think that it is. But it's just hidden. But you do have to manually add this in the control center.
This is the thing. So if you don't go looking for it, you're not going to
know.
So what you need to do is on your iPhone, you know how you swipe down from the top right to bring up the control center. And then there's an option there that you can, I think there's actually a plus that you can add things to the control center.
You have to hit the plus.
Once you do that, you'll see all sorts of things that you can add, your flashlight if it's not already there, your all sorts of home things. But one of the things that you'll see is it's 4 round circular buttons, and they are the 4 different ambient music themes. And so you've got the sleep one, which is just very calming sounds, no have words, just that you can help you go to sleep if you want to listen to something. It's not quite a noise machine. I mean, it's more than like static. It's actual music and songs. It's just very, very calm. You have the chill one, which that one I think is very much like what you were sort of talking about, the spa music. You know, you just sort of chill out. It makes you feel good. That's actually one that I found very nice to have background music as I'm working. The productivity one is the other one that I like. Apple calls this music for working on tasks. It's a little bit more upbeat. And again, these are actual songs on Apple Music. In fact, there was actually one or two of them that I was surprised. I expected this to be total background elevator music that I wouldn't really know. But there was actually songs in there that I recognized from like soundtracks and stuff like that. I'm like, oh, I know this song. And like now I can see who the artist is and what the name of it is. And then there's also well-being. So there's the 4 different ones that they have. And you can choose to add all 4. You can just choose to add one. But I think it's worth talking about, Brett, because unless you go look for it, you're not going to know it's there. And it's, you might want to have it because it's, I mean, sometimes it's nice to just have something in your ears in the background.
Absolutely.
You know, if your brain is sort of only half paying attention to it, I find you can focus more on the task at hand. So that's a
Well,
cool
you've
feature.
talked about this before, just having some music without lyrics in it.
Yeah.
And we've always had the capability to do that in Spotify or Apple Music. You can go find some kind of a playlist. But the fact that they allowed this to be put into a control center is just interesting. First of all,
Placement's interesting. Yeah.
I thought it was just going to be one little thing in control center, but as you're talking about, it's 4 different ones. The last one that you didn't mention was well-being. That's the one that I actually that I actually did. But did you know also, and I just saw this on a video, I think one of the links that you had to, if you tap on it, once you add it to your control center, it has the playlist there. And so this one in well-being, the default is pure meditation. But if you tap on it, you actually have additional options there. And you can even pull from your library in there. So, so my well-being playlist can be pure meditation. It can be spa, so I'm not too far off with spa music. Beats and breath, not really sure what that is, or pure calm. And that's just in the well-being. And then I could actually pull from my library because I feel like these are actually music playlists from Apple Music.
That is
they
what
just
they
kind
are.
of curated it here a little bit better.
So much so that while it's playing, like on my iPhone, I've got the island at the top of it. And so while I'm playing music in the background, it's, you know, it shows up in the digital island, or it's called top.
Yeah.
And if I tap on it, it brings up something that it looks like an app.
It looks like an app,
It's not an app that I could actually look at the app icon and launch it like that way. You
But
have
if
to
you
launch
go
it
up
from the
and
center.
you can
But
see
it is
it.
truly an app. You can see the album art, you can see the artist name, and you can like skip something, you can go back. So it works. It's you know, imagine it's a subset of the Apple Music app that's just focused on
I think
background
that's a
music.
good way to
So anyway,
describe
enough
it.
talking about that. But
I
it's
know.
a cool new feature.
But it's nice. I mean, that's one of my favorite things this morning that I was enjoying so
Very,
much
very
on there.
cool. You mentioned the Apple Watch, so that's another
Yes.
update. This was interesting because everything's updated on Monday. The phone, the Vision Pro, the computer, the iPad. Apple Watch update comes out and then it's instantly pulled.
Oh.
And so I went to go up. I'm sitting in my office on Monday. I'm like,
that's
the
right.
update's around. I'm going to update it. And it said it's not available. But then about 24 hours later, it came back and then it went away again and then it came back. And when it finally came back on Tuesday afternoon, it's stuck. So there's, you know, regular updates, nothing really consequential. There's one, I think, marquee feature, which I was excited about when I read about it. And then I realized I'm not as excited about it. And the idea is, and we talked about the idea last week when it was previewed, when there were articles previewing it, the idea is that if you are in silent mode on your Apple Watch, you can, and you know, if you have an alarm go off to wake you up in the morning, it'll vibrate. But if you want something louder, you can make it so that the sound actually breaks through the watch so that even if your watch is normally in the silent mode, it will actually make noise to wake you up as an alarm. But here's what I noticed. It doesn't work the way that I use my alarm. The way that I use my alarm is I will say, you know, hey, you know who, wake me up at, you know, 6:30 in the morning, right? And then that'll create an alarm and it will go off at 6:30 in the morning. But this feature is actually tied to the focus mode, which is people that if you put yourself in a focus mode of like sleep, and then you have that focus mode end at a certain time in the morning with an alarm, that's how it all works. So if you already use that feature, good for you. This is going to be great. But if you're sort of an ad hoc, and people, if you wake up at the same time every day, that feature makes sense. I don't. What time I wake up in the morning depends upon what I have going on in my office every day, how late I was up the night before, a million things. And so I just set manually an alarm every night. So anyway, the current version of this feature doesn't work for me, but maybe it works for you.
Okay. So that's the watchOS. What about iPad? You had one brief mention about iPad OS 18.4. Apparently just a few little tweaks, nothing really big on the iPad.
The one big change that you'll see, and it's a change that you previously saw on your phone, is do you remember when one of the previous updates, I forget which number it was, 18.1 to something like that, is they added the AI, Apple Intelligence, to the message, to the phone app,
Right.
to the mail app. And so when you first opened up your mail app, it by default says, I can sort your messages into, and I forget what the categories
It's like
are.
categories and a priority sorting or something
all
like
this
that.
sort of stuff. Do you have it still turned on your phone?
I turned it
You
off.
turned it off.
I turned
and
it
I did
off.
the same because for two reasons. First of all, I just didn't like the idea of Apple sorting my mail stuff.
I don't trust it all the way.
Exactly. I do something similar on some of my mailboxes with SaneBox, so I totally understand that. But for me, it didn't even make sense because like my email, my primary email is my work email, right? And sometimes I look at that on my computer, which is a Windows computer on Microsoft Outlook, and sometimes on my iPad. But just because Apple sorted it on my iPad or iPhone, it's not sorted on my work computer, so it's just too confusing.
See,
suffice it to say, if you like that feature on your iPhone, hey, good news. Now it's on your iPad.
Okay.
If you don't, then like me, when I first updated, I instantly saw, I'm looking at my mail right now. At the top of my iPad, it's like, hey, I've got things sorted for you. I'm like, good for you. I'm turning this off right now. And I turned it off, and that was the end of it. So, but I will say that I'm glad that they updated it, even if I'm not using that particular feature, because what it means is the mail changes on the iPhone, Apple's trying to bring all of them to the iPad because you want them to be in sync.
That makes sense.
Right. You want to have the same interface to the extent, subject to the specific things for the iPad.
Last but not least, tvOS. New design changes for the Apple TV app. I haven't had a chance to really look at this.
And I haven't looked. I literally have not watched my Apple TV since Monday when all this stuff came out. And I'm trying to even think what the changes are. I know that there are little tweaks to the interface. But,
here's a big one. There's a large plus button for easily adding titles to your watch list.
Oh,
larger plus button. Okay.
Sounds
Next
exciting.
to it is a big eye for accessing. Okay, just a few little tweaks on there, not just a whole lot. But I feel like, and there was one other story just quickly. All of these things, some of these may be pretty small, but we're always good to make sure that we do update them. Where was this? I had a story here. The security details, right? I mean, these are important when it is a 0.1 update like this. We say this almost every time, I know. And it is important to make sure that you get this fairly soon after it is released, just because there are some security updates, some that they don't even go into a lot of detail on, right?
Yeah, and I haven't seen any reports, Brett, that there were any showstoppers this time, things that are actively being exploited in the wild. But that doesn't mean that any of these things could not be exploited tomorrow by somebody.
Correct.
So it's always good to update. And that's actually a good transition into, now we have 18.4. This was a little bit more substantial of an update than some of the previous ones. Between now and this summer, when Apple previews iOS 19, 18.4 won't be the last update.
Oh, you don't think so? Okay, that's what I was going to ask.
Already they have a developer version in beta of 18.5.
Oh, okay.
But my understanding and my prediction is that 18.5, maybe there'll be an 18.6. I don't think there's going to be anything major in those. I think it's going to be security updates, and I think it's going to be bug fixes and
some
little.
tweaks.
Now that the Apple design and developers, they have things out in the wild. They're like, you know what? We released this in 18.4, but now we're realizing we actually want to tweak this a little bit. I think that my prediction is that's what we're going to see between now and the next major update of iOS 19. It's not that we won't have more updates. We will. I just don't expect to have a big feature list like we've had here. And if I'm wrong, then maybe we'll be sitting here in May or June talking about it. But I really don't. I think this is probably it.
Yeah, I was confused because June at the Worldwide Developers Conference, they'll announce iOS 19, but that typically doesn't get released until like September or something like that. So you're right. We have time for some additional updates. But then I was just thinking, we talked last week or a couple of weeks ago about the fact that 19 may have some very big changes, like in the interface aspect on there, right? And so like you said, that I think that underscores your point. Like between now and September, we may just have maybe 18.5, maybe 4.1 or something like that, just some other minor things on there. But really looking forward to a big update, overhaul. In fact, I would say maybe it sounds like for 19.
Literally yesterday, I was walking around the expo hall floor and somebody stopped me who, sort of knows of our podcast.
Recognized you.
And they were actually, we were just sort of chit-chatting about computer, geeky stuff.
Right.
And they were saying, what do you think? Do you think that this interface, this new interface is going to come out this summer? And, I think that it will from all the rumors. But it's significant, Brett, because, people become so comfortable with your iPhone and your iPad.
You know where to go.
When there's change. Yeah. It's, even if it's a good change, it's a little disruptive, right? And so you want it to be a good change, and you don't want to have these major interface overhauls very often. the last real big one we had was a long time ago. And then we had like the new thin interface. So, hopefully, and Apple knows this. They know that they're not going to just willy-nilly change things. They're going to hopefully do it for a good reason. I personally don't mind a fresh coat of paint, and I do look because I'm sort of this makes things exciting. But I know some people just don't want things to change, and hopefully it'll make everybody
then they have
happy.
to relearn like the muscle memory and everything.
Muscle memory, right?
We'll see. We only have a couple of months. Well, about 3 months. Yeah, 2 months until we hear what Apple has in store for the updates on that. Well, I think that might be enough on 18.4. Let's get back to the tech show just real quick. I'd like to just run through. We've got somebody we want to pull on as a special guest real quick, but we had a great time last night going out to dinner with a lot of folks that either have known us or they were coming to our presentations at this show. So the American Bar Association Tech Show. It's an annual tech show, a technology conference is where we are, as we mentioned before. And we've had a couple of presentations. I had a presentation yesterday. You had a presentation yesterday. I was speaking on using an iPad mainly for trial presentation, even though yesterday we were talking about preparing, so we were even going into all kinds of detail about the equipment that you need, how to collect your files from your computer, copy them over to your iPad, for example. A lot of those things, great questions from the audience and people, asking some good stuff on that. And then today, this afternoon, we're recording this from Friday morning. This afternoon, I've got another session where we're doing we're going to set everything up and we're going to show people exactly how to do a presentation from the iPad. And it's not just using a trial pad app, which is what you and I both know very well, but even like using PowerPoint, for example, or Keynote, to be able to show that and project it onto a screen. And so that's been pretty exciting. This is always a big hit with a lot of people that come here because where we know we can do presentations from Windows PC or a Mac computer, the iPad continues to be something pretty special that a lot of people like to learn about. So that's what I'm doing today. My co-presenter has been Tara Cheever from Lit Software, who develops the Trial Pad app and the Transcript Pad app and the Doc Review Pad app, and those are really good. So that's what I have been busy doing.
And I loved your session yesterday because, again, you talked about a bunch of stuff, but you really did focus on the Lit Software apps, which, first of all, if you are an attorney listening to this podcast, you should definitely come to Tech Show one of these years if you haven't done it yet, because it's a great conference, and especially now that we're in the new digs here that I presume that we'll be using for many years to come. Fantastic. And yesterday was a perfect example of it because you were up on there talking about how you can actually use apps like Trial Pad and Transcript Pad and stuff like that. But since you had Tara, who works for, she works for developers, she's one of the co-founders of the company. And so she was able to talk about some things that I had never even thought about. She's like, here's a use case that, we hear somebody calls me because they're getting ready for a trial and this sort of thing. And so it was great to hear her perspective because obviously she's heard all the war stories. She knows the good, bad, and otherwise. So it was a really good presentation and talking about that. I love Transcript Pad so much, especially, you can suck in your transcripts and you can have like the questions and answers. It's the only way that I want to read a transcript for a deposition because it's so easy to read it. And then you can tag things. In the old days, I would print out the deposition and then I would highlight it with a pen. But then 2 months later, I'm like, why did I highlight this yellow? I know that it's important. Why is it important? But now that I can use Transcript Pad, I say this is important because it goes to the issue of, if it's a car accident case, did they say the light was red or green, to pick a simple example? And this issue goes to what kind of damages they say they got, whiplash or whatever it is. And so therefore, if I want to say, I want to see just the testimony about why the product part failed, I can then bring up all of that testimony in Transcript Pad. So I love it for that. And then I'll just say one more thing about that app is it's cool now that you can actually sync video because more and more I'm having depositions where you have a videographer in there and you get the video and the app can automatically sync everything together and you can even make excerpts for trial. And it's interesting, Brett, because sometimes you'll look at a transcript, black and white, you see a question, you see an answer, and it's like, okay, there's the matter of fact question and answer. And then you look at the video of the same thing and you're like, this guy's lying. I can totally tell that this guy is lying. We have people waving to us as we record here. So I love that. But one app that y'all did not talk about yesterday, I guess we'll talk about it in today's session, but that I posted a review on iPhone JD this week is Timeline Pad, which is this fantastic app. And it's funny because we're here at Tech Show, and it was a few years ago I was at Tech Show, and I was talking to one of the other co-founders of Lit Software, Ian O'Flaherty, and he was like, Jeff, I have this new idea for an app of having a timeline. And I'm like, this makes so much sense because And so, I mean, so many cases, as a litigator, when things happen is so important.
Right.
Did you learn about this
Right.
before or afterwards? And you want to pull everything together just for understanding your own case. You
Yes.
want to put everything into a timeline. And then as I'm looking at the timeline, I can now start to, so this is when they wrote the letter.
Right.
This is when this phone call happened. And you see the big picture. So just getting a handle on your case is useful. But then, of course, since the same company makes TrialPad, which is like the king of presenting evidence, once you
pop
have
it
your
over there.
timeline, if you're going to a mediation or you're going to trial or anything else, you can use that app to then show it on the screen, and you can show the entire timeline, or you can say, I want to have just this one layer
Right.
that has like these events, like just things that the plaintiff did on the timeline, or just things the defendant did. Or you can even have like, I just want to have a little preset thing that's just showing this 6-month period.
Right.
And you click one button and it brings up just that 6-month period. So it's a really well thought out app that
Wonderful.
it makes so much sense. I mean, timelines are so important to lawyers. So anyway, and I don't want this to be an ad for the company or something, but I wrote a big review this week because I was
we
very
like them
excited
a
about the
lot.
app. I can't wait to use it. So anyway, so you had a good session yesterday.
Yeah.
I guess
Well, I was just going to say, so I pulled up your review because it's a great review. I don't know how many other people have done some reviews on this because it is new, even though I do know we have been talking with Ian and Tara
but now
about
it's
this
out.
app for
Now
a
it's
long,
available.
long time. And I'm just glad that it's out. And it's just so nice that you can do that right there on the iPad. And anyway, I'm pointing people to make sure that they go and check out your review. And I'll put the link in the show notes on some of that. Okay, so while those sessions are absolutely fun, you just knocked it out of the park yesterday with Kent and Bryce. In fact, I'm going to try to pull up a photo here.
Okay.
I think I have your permission. And Kent, you can't see his face because both of you had your Apple Vision Pros on your face as you're giving a presentation, talking to people, and we were watching you. It was just brilliant. That was so fun to watch all of this. You explained it, and I'm going to try to pull up this picture here.
So we were doing a presentation on the future of augmented and virtual reality for attorneys. What is the technology today, but perhaps more importantly, what do we see as being the technology that's coming in the future? And so for a good part of our presentation, I just had my keynote slides and we were going through slides that we put together. But there are parts of our presentation, and a good example is, if you've ever used a Vision Pro, one of the just mind-blowing things is when you have a video conference with someone else, because unlike a Zoom conference where everybody lives in their little rectangular window, you can have this thing called spatial video conferencing, where you see the person's face. It's an avatar, so to speak, but it's actually looking at their face. So who's the Michael Eisenberg? Come by and see us, and you can actually see them, and it's almost like you're in the same room, and you see their face, you see their hands. And when I've had these conversations, for the first 30 seconds, you're like, oh, this is cool technology. But then the next thing that you know, it's just like you're sitting in a room together, unlike a Zoom call. And I really think it's going to change things. So to show that to the audience yesterday,
Yes.
you throw it on the screen right now.
Look at that. I've got a picture pulled up of both of you right now.
I put on my Vision Pro, he put on his. I was screen sharing, just like how you would share your iPad to an Apple TV that's connected
Look
to the
at
TV.
that.
I was screen sharing so that people that were watching could see on the big screen what was going on. And it was really, really cool. So it was a very, very cool session. And I loved it. Most people in the audience did not have a Vision Pro yet. But
there was only like maybe 4 or 5 that raised their hand.
But I think everybody knows that this is revolutionary. Today's Vision Pro, as much as I love it, this is just the 1.0. This is like the first version of the iPhone. But in the future, we're going to get smaller and better and stuff like that. So it was a really cool session.
It was so good. Your passion was just amazing and being able to talk about it. But I mean, you went through so many great things about it. Even like, not just to me, the aspect I think that was so immediate was the fact that you could have sort of like that Zoom call, if you, I don't even call it a Zoom call, even though you were on Zoom, because you kind of had, you had the face, but the idea that you could be in the room, but you were even talking about how you could be watching a movie together through your Vision Pros, and then you could like turn and see Canton and talk about the movie while you're doing it, like even though you're, he's in Oklahoma and you're in New Orleans. And it's just, it was just great. And the fact that we could see it on the screen that you were seeing, even though it was a 2D representation, not the 3D version that you were seeing.
Let me say one more thing about the session, and then maybe we can have people here if they want to talk to us, people on camera if they're willing to do so. We'll see.
Oh, sure.
You can do whatever you want. Absolutely. Come sit over here next to Brett. But we have a special guest.
We do, yes.
Let me just say that the other thing about the Vision Pro that I really loved is, as attorneys, we are often trying to persuade people with our stories. And sometimes we do that with our words, And sometimes we do that by showing pictures. And then more recently, it's very effective to have like a demonstrative exhibit that maybe has a graphic or maybe has a video or something like that. I do think that this virtual reality stuff is the next level. And the reason that I know that is because, you want to have passion in the people that you're trying to persuade, right? And I know that if I look at a picture of my daughter when she was 3 years old, I'm like, oh, that's really, really cute. When I was taking the plane up to Chicago here, I'm just sitting on the plane, what are you going to do? And I just happened to find myself looking at an old video of my daughter's birthday party when she was 3 and looking at the birthday of my daughter, like it almost brought tears to my eyes, right? Because it has like all these memories. It was like, isn't this really cool? And then you go to the next level with this, virtual reality where it's 3D and it's immersive, and it's so realistic. And so we as attorneys, if you want to convince the jury or sometimes the judge, showing the jury a picture, you can get some emotions from them that are on your side. Showing them a video, next level. But when we can get to the point in the future where you can actually have it's cheap enough that you can get a dozen little, glasses that are smart glasses, pass them out to the jury, and have them do it. I mean, the jury is going to be eating on your hands. So this is what I think is the future. But anyway, that was the session.
Let's bring on a special guest real quick. So Michael Eisenberg is somebody we've both been on his podcast. You're a practicing attorney in the Washington, D.C. area.
Representing veterans before veterans benefits bills. Okay, thank you. Sorry.
We got to.
You don't want to steal the spotlight, as they say. But I want to jump in on something that you're talking about, Jeff. And you keep saying the word passion. And the reason why I'm going to focus on that word is that the attorneys who use Apple products, which you guys talk about wonderfully on your podcast, have a passion for the machines that they use with their Apple products. And I think that's really important because when you have sort of a stone wall, a brick wall of, working with Windows devices now and then, it's just more of a frustrating situation. But when you have a passion for, the materials that you're working with the equipment that you're working with, that shows. Because, if you look at the excitement that you have about talking about doing a trial presentation, it's like, oh my gosh, it's such a joy to work with this stuff that it becomes almost like a hobby and the work becomes more seamless in what you're doing.
Yes.
And, I think the word passion is the perfect word for attorneys who use Apple products. And I would encourage attorneys to use Apple products because when your life is just a little bit simpler, it shows. And talk about passion. Look at the array of Mac devices, of Apple devices we have. We have an iPad.
Right here on the tape?
We have 2 iPads. We have an iPad with a keyboard.
We're recording with an iPhone over here.
Recording with an iPhone. Actually, I did a presentation yesterday on attorneys using video to help generate their SEO. And I say that one of the best devices they have, probably in their arsenal already, is their iPhone, which may not be excellent, it may not be TV quality, but it is good enough that you don't have to waste so much money on that type of expenditure.
Yes. Yeah. And I agree with you when you talk about that. It's passion in terms of loving your products, but it's also feeling more comfortable using it because I talk to attorneys in my own law firm, and I'm sure this is true whatever walk of life you are, whether you're a doctor or whether you are a cobbler, but you want to be comfortable with your technology because that's what allows you to use it to the next level, to feel comfortable using it with a judge or with a jury. And so if you are totally into the Windows ecosphere and you just love the Microsoft stuff, that's fantastic. But Apple has already, that's always been part of the DNA of the company, is to make things approachable and yet powerful. And so I think that there is something there, and I totally agree with you. And the attorneys that are comfortable with the technology, they're the ones that bring it to the next level. And the judges, the juries, even just appellate attorneys, whoever it is that you're trying to convince on behalf of your client, get you those results. Because that's what it's all about, right? It's confidence.
And let's make it kind of a simple analogy. It's like using the right pen. When you're writing something, if you're using like a pen that makes uncomfortable and maybe too thin, too thick, whatever, but when you have the right pen, for Max, I have a Mont Blanc. I love my Mont Blanc. And let me tell you, it's very comfortable writing. I have poor penmanship, but when I'm using this, it's amazing how
great technology.
Yes.
Today's episode is sponsored by.
Feel free.
So,
But I'll let you go back.
yeah, and I'll ask you one more question before we let you go, Michael. You've been walking around the floor here
Yes, sir.
yesterday, stuff like that. Anything that you want to jump out that you've seen that's been interesting on the floor? There's so much, but pick one thing.
The one thing I think is how everyone is integrating AI.
Absolutely.
And I think the important thing to remember about using AI is that AI is a tool. It's not an answer. It's not going to replace attorneys. You don't have to worry about your job. But if you use it as a tool correctly, you're going to get your work done faster, more efficiently, but always, always, always check your work. I can't emphasize that enough.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks. Thanks for jumping in with us. I really appreciate it. Thanks for jumping in.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thanks, Michael.
So, Michael, I was just going to
These guys do the best job when it comes to talking about Apple products. You're crazy not to follow. Make sure you hit like and subscribe.
Thank you, Michael.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna do back at you there because Michael, you can see I've pulled up the page here. Runs the Tech Savvy Lawyer podcast. Both of us have been a guest on that lawyer. It's a great. In fact, you must have just posted something just yesterday, right? You had a whole show that or it's a blog post. It's not a podcast on there. So great blog as well as a podcast. The TechSavvyLawyer.page. And you're announcing Tech Savvy Saturdays, right? There was a brand new thing. Come on back.
Sorry, I didn't want to do too much self-promotion and steal the thunder. So every third Saturday, starting next month, I'm going to have a Tech Savvy Saturday where it's an open Zoom conference. Everyone's invited. I'll have a guest speaker talk about using tech, and they'll give some examples live on air. And then the second half will be sort of an open community triage. So if you have a tech problem or tech question,
like office hours.
Exactly. Yeah. But it'll be on Saturdays at noon on Eastern Time, and I hope to see you there. Thank you again, guys.
Thanks Michael.
Again.
Appreciate it.
Bill, let's see you over there too. Come over here too.
Yeah, we have somebody else we want to bring in because actually it's just like our impromptu production specialist here coming on.
Bill Vance is the Chief Technology Officer of my law firm, Adams & Reese, and we did not plan in advance to be here both at the conference or today. It just so happened that I was coming as a speaker and you were coming to look at technology, and so here we are today. Bill, you and I were walking around the tech show floor yesterday. Obviously, Michael just talked about the AI stuff, something that we're thinking about very much as well right now too, huh?
Absolutely. I was in a session yesterday. They said there's 525 legal products that specifically have AI added to it, which is just absolutely incredible. They said by the end of 2025, there will be over 1,000.
Yeah.
And again, it's the tools, you got to pick them. The tools do all of the same things. How many tools have we seen so far this week that just said document summarization, right? It's a matter of getting the tool that works best for you.
Yeah, I feel like we're at the point where, and you see it on the tech show floor and expo floor as you walk around, it's almost like if a product doesn't incorporate AI in some fashion, you feel like it's been left behind. At the same time, though, I do have a concern of maybe it's too much. Maybe people are just trying too much to do the AI thing when it's not really, good. We were joking about it as we were walking over here today, Brett, that I was in a session yesterday where one of the speakers was talking about how you can use, I think it was Microsoft Copilot is what Mitch was talking about.
Right.
And he was saying that, you could use it to craft an email. One thing that happens to attorneys all the time, it happens at our firm, Bill, is like you'll get a random email that says, I want to hire you to do X. And sometimes you think it might be a real person, but you want them to know, actually, that's not what I do. It's not my practice area. But you don't want them to think that maybe you are their lawyer from an ethics standpoint. So you should respond and say, thank you for your email, but I'm not going to take this case. Other times, it's just a spam thing. And sometimes it's hard to tell the difference. And so Mitch was suggesting that you could use AI. He would say something real quickly, and Copilot, Microsoft Copilot, would draft it into something that was a little bit more elegant to send as a message, which is good.
Yes.
But the question that I asked him was the time that it takes you to use the prompts and tell the AI how to make the message
after.
You just write the 2-sentence email in that much time. And we were sort of joking about that. But I understand where he was coming from, because his point is that you could get more consistency this way.
That's right.
And he was describing that you can actually have, and one of the things that many of these vendors that we're looking at, Bill, you and I were looking at this yesterday, was you can have like a prompt for, I want you to summarize these documents and, for example, contracts. For these contracts, I want you to tell me what they say about, choice of law provision, the termination dates, whatever. And you can have a series of contracts, and the AI, without you having to review them, will pull all that out and then put it into like columns. And then once you know, this is the thing that I always look for in my employment contracts, you could save that prompt. And so then in the future, you click one button, it runs the same prompt on the same documents. And what I liked about the one that Bill, you and I were looking at yesterday is if you don't, and it might even have this feature, you look at what the AI does, you say, that looks fantastic. Can I trust it? Because you always have to worry about hallucinations.
Right.
And they have little things you can hover over and it will actually show you the language. And if you click, it will bring up the actual document.
Oh.
So I can say, oh, this comes from here, which is important because oftentimes the AI will get it right. But sometimes when you look at the contract, you might say, oh, but you know what? The sentence before addresses something that's also relevant to this. And so now that I've looked at the source, it's good, but it still saved me so much time because I haven't read the full document beginning to end and then pull up the next one. So I think this AI stuff, I mean, it's revolutionizing everything, but I do think in law, it's going to be big.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Jeff, I have a question for you. How big do the monitors need to be on your desk now? Because I think the 24-inch ones are not going to cut it. Yesterday we saw that on a 47-inch TV.
That's true. That's true. Well, you know, the answer, Bill, is we just all have Vision Pros, and that way we can have virtual monitors around us. Bill, you're in charge of technology at my law firm. Can you please buy Vision Pros for all of our attorneys? Can you authorize that purchase?
I'll need to talk to our finance partner, Frank, on that one.
We'll see.
But, you know, just quickly, that was a good point you guys were making, you and Kent and Bryce in your session yesterday, is he had this huge Excel spreadsheet, right? And typically, you could put it on a 32-inch monitor, you know, 27-inch monitor, whatever, but then you're going to have to scroll horizontally. And you guys were making the point that you could put it up inside a Vision Pro and you can literally like have it to where you could look back and forth. And from the productivity standpoint, I think that that's important. I'm not suggesting, although didn't you say like one of your folks in the firm has
finance partner who uses Excel spreadsheets all the time has a 43-inch curved monitor.
a curved monitor?
Because it's exactly what he needs for his job, getting him the tech he needs for his job.
And, you know, I was talking to an attorney about this yesterday, that it's useful to have. I mean, I remember years ago at Tech Show, people were telling me, Jeff, you need to have dual monitors because you can get so much more work done. When you can have your email over here and your Word document here, and you can see the contract while you're writing about it. And I agree with that. In fact, I often do the same thing with my iPad. I now have a dual monitor setup, but even before I had it, I would have my monitor and my iPad as a dual monitor. Now I have 3 monitors, but what this attorney was telling me, and I agree with, he's like, I don't like the fact that somebody comes into my office and I'm behind all these monitors. It's like,
there's a barrier. That's
how you doing over there? It's a little obnoxious. And so I know this is futuristic. We're not doing this in 2025, but if we could get to a point where a future Vision Pro is as small as a pair of glasses so that I could have a bunch of monitors and yet still be approachable, that somebody comes by, I can just swipe to the left and the monitors, in that virtual space, they're just sitting over here and I'm having the conversation and I swing them back in. So again, I know this is a little sci-fi, but I do think it's coming. I really do, because we know that having lots and lots of monitor space is so useful, and yet you don't always want it there, and so it's interesting.
Bill, anything else that besides AI? Although I know that's the top of mind for everybody, but any other things that you are excited about or interested in?
I'm actually excited about the new location. Before we were jammed in a hotel and it was quite crowded. The rooms were kind of difficult to find. Now at McCormick Space, it is completely. We're all spread out, and it's easier to go to the vendor selections. They have more space. It's easier to go up and down the rows and see that stuff, and the hotel's not that far away. So
we have puppies. Well, they're not here yet, but they had
the therapy dog. That I loved it. It was full all day long. People were over there.
They know what they're doing.
Yes, absolutely.
That's hilarious. I like it. It is interesting that we are in this space. I should have had more pictures that we could have pulled up, but I'm positive you're going to have a post tech show post that you'll have some other pictures and stuff that we can put. But it is really nice, like you said, Bill, to have it. I mean, the fact that we can look out in windows and we can see the skyline, it's just really great.
It's wonderful location.
And just real quick, I was going to say, I alluded to the fact that we had a dinner that Jeff and I went to. There was maybe, I don't know, we had about 8 people, I think, that went with us, from attendees. But you were there as well. It was just good to see you.
Absolutely, So wonderful restaurant and enjoying the good meal in Chicago.
It's really good. Thanks for joining us, Bill. And thanks for jumping in and being like our production manager for here today. It's great to see you, Bill, as always. Good. You have a picture. See, you're going to post a picture of the puppies.
I'll put it in my after text.
It was funny because last night when I was walking back after all the things, they had I was behind the puppies, like they were walking them back to the car.
Oh.
And they were some of the most well-behaved dogs I have ever seen in my life. Like, I just wanted to like fall on them and start
exactly.
petting them. No wonder everybody wanted to be with them
So
all
cute,
day.
so cute, so cute.
Okay, so how about let's wrap it up just a little bit. But I wanted to mention we both each have an additional session today. We already talked about mine with the trial pad, but your session this afternoon, I cannot wait for. It is basically here. I'll bring it up, but you can explain it. It's all of the productivity tips and hacks that you could even think of for the iPhone and the iPad.
Yeah, what I was trying to think is if somebody, and this actually happens in real life, is people know that I love the iPad and the iPhone. And if somebody sat down with me and said, Jeff, I'm an attorney, I want to get the most out of my devices, what are the things that I need to know? And I could say, hold on, take notes, we're going to go fast.
Right.
And we're just going to go through all of them.
You're going to
and
blow
so
through
I have
them.
tried to stick as many, I've got far more than I'm going to be able to get through in an hour.
It's
but
going to be good,
it'll be
though.
a fun session. And so that's going to be fun. And then afterwards, I'm sure I'll take some of the best ones and I'll put them in future posts on the website. And
Oh,
stuff.
absolutely.
So that's going to be fun.
I'll take a lot of pictures today.
It's fun for me because my session yesterday, Brett, was very much futuristic. Where are we going? This is early days, stuff like that. My one today is very practical. It's like, you can use this right now.
Do it right
you
now.
You can literally start using this as soon as the session ends. So those are my two sessions.
You're going to share a tip. You're going to share. I'm going to share a tip that I'm going to share tomorrow. But real quick, let's do a quick in the show.
Quick in the show.
Yeah, I love this because typically we could have just called it In the Severance because it's like all we have been talking about is a severance show. But now that's over, at least for now, right? Season 3 is on the horizon. Well, a few months down the way. But the studio, we talked about this. I think both of us have watched at least the first 2 episodes so far. Yes. And we talked about this just real quick. It's a great show, but I was even more mesmerized by the cinematography. The way that they filmed the show is amazing, Jeff.
Exactly. And I don't think it spoils anything. I hope it doesn't spoil anything to say that the title of the second episode is called The Oneer. That's a phrase I actually did not know beforehand, but it's a filmmaking term that means that you have just a single shot. So you're not cutting, it's a single camera, and it's just no cuts. So it means that much like if you're watching actors on a stage play, there's no room for mistakes, right? Because they just have to be perfect.
Wow.
And it's just going to keep on going. And the longer that the episode goes and the longer that the single shot goes, you're more impressed that, oh my goodness, how did nobody made mistakes? The lighting is perfect. I mean, how are they even technically doing this? And it's very meta because the episode.
Exactly. I was just going to say that.
And the actors are talking about it as they're actually doing a oneer. It's very, very, very clever. So don't get me wrong, the content of the show is very fun. And one of the nice things is that because it's a show about Hollywood, my understanding is the star. I mean, it's just going to have cameos.
So many cameos already.
So if you're interested in just seeing the rich and famous, actors that on screen for a few minutes, you're going to see them in the show. But clearly the production value of the show is off the top, which makes it fun because, I love, it used to be, we always talk about how way back when, HBO was the place that you went for the high value production shows. Right. And HBO has some of those now, whatever it's called nowadays, Max. But now I think Apple TV Plus is now the place for that because Severance was amazing.
Yeah.
So many other shows that have been incredible. This one, clearly people that really care about the craft of telling a story. Again, it brings us right back to what we were talking about for attorneys, Brett. Right. It's all, whether I am trying to convince a jury or an appellate court or whether a director in Hollywood is just trying to tell a good story and be persuasive. Right. It's all about having care for what you do and just doing it really, really well. So I'm excited about this show. And here come the dogs, Brett.
There they are. Bill, you might have to get a quick shot of it real quick. We give you permission.
Turn the camera.
Turn to the dogs. They're coming in right now. They're parading in.
That is too funny.
Thanks, Bill. He's the production manager and cameraman at the same time. Fantastic. That's so great. Look at them. Look, they're so obedient.
They are very cute.
Don't you just want to hug them? Okay, that's really great.
I may have to go do that later on. Yes.
Okay, that's probably plenty on here. Let's get to a couple of quick things. I'll go first real quick. In the know. We're doing In the Know. So tomorrow I'm actually doing an episode that is, it's the closer of the conference. It's been this way for a long time. We call it 60 Tips in 60 Minutes. Mm-hmm. No, I'm sorry, 60 seconds. No, 60 minutes. It's been a long day already. But we do it so there's 4 of us that are on stage and we share these tips just in rapid fire mode and it's great. Here's one that I'm going to share tomorrow, which I have been using at the conference. I still have business cards that I will give out. but less and less so these days. Everybody says, well, why don't we just connect on LinkedIn, right? Which is great. And so typically what I do is I look at their badge and I get their name and I go into my LinkedIn app and I start typing in their name. Is this you? Wait, there's two mics here. Is this you or is this one? Well, no longer. If you go into your LinkedIn app, this is iPhone or Android, and you can tap the search bar at the top of your app in LinkedIn. And when you do that, that's where you would start typing in somebody's name. But if you look to the right, the far to the right of that search bar, there's a little tiny QR code symbol. And if you tap that, it will immediately bring up your QR symbol that somebody that you're sharing with can open their LinkedIn app. And when you tap that, one of the tabs is the QR symbol, the other is scan. And they just tap scan, they look at your QR symbol, and immediately they're pulled right into your LinkedIn on that.
Yeah.
And I can do the same way. It's so easy. Now, I know we can like tap, if they have an iPhone, I can tap that, but it's like if they have an Android and I don't necessarily want them on my contacts, I just want them in my LinkedIn, networking list. And I found this has worked out really fantastic.
Yeah. Another thing that I like about it is especially here, you're at a conference, you're going to meet people and you want to share stuff like that. But if you just share a contact information, of course, Apple has made it easy to do that for a long time. Or even if you just share like here's the firm I'm at, here's my current bio on my webpage.
Right.
That's actually interesting. But oftentimes I get more interesting details about a person from their LinkedIn page.
Yes.
Because, for example, if I was to share my contact, it has, here's my law firm and here's my law firm bio page, which is interesting.
Yeah.
But my LinkedIn will also have, where my education was. That happens to be on my law firm webpage, but it may not be there. And although I personally have been working at the same law firm for 30 years now, sometimes people move around. And although when they give you a business card, whether it's actual or virtual, that's where they currently are. But when you looked at your LinkedIn bio, you can see, they previously worked for X and they were at Y and they were at Z. And when they were at Z, they may actually know somebody else I know that worked at Z.
Exactly.
And so LinkedIn is, again, I know LinkedIn is nothing revolutionary, but LinkedIn, it's been around for a long time. But it's a great way to get more information about other people. And so that goes back to your tip that it's if you're going to share something, it's a great thing to share. So that's a really, really good tip.
Scan the QR tip. That's mine.
Okay, so here's my tip today, and it is shared with you. Shared with you is a concept that Apple has had for a while, and you and I had a tip in the past on this show, Brett, where we talked about that. You know how sometimes a friend of yours might share something in the Messages app, right?
Right.
And so, and then, it's been 3 months later, and you're like, gosh, I know that they shared that restaurant with me, or they shared that product on Amazon that they use, but like, am I going to scroll all the way back and find it? And so the tip that we shared in the past is when you're in Messages, if you tap on the person's face at the top and, get to the information, you then get to a screen where you can see a list of all the things that person has shared with you in the Messages app. Are you laughing at the dogs?
I am. I know.
Okay.
How can you not? People just are magnetized to them.
But so that's just within the Messages app. But my tip today is it's actually more than that. Apple has taken this shared with you idea and they are bringing it through all their products. And the page that I have a link to in today's show notes is a page on the Apple's website where they talk about how you can use shared with you, if you're in the music app and somebody shares a song with you, for example, even in Apple TV. If somebody shares that you should watch something, you can see that from within the TV app, what they've shared with you. And the one that I want to focus on is, we all use Safari on our iPad, right? And as it's described on this page, and I'm going to do it as I'm talking. So I'm in Safari, I'm looking at a website. I'm going to press the plus, right? So as if I'm going to open up a brand new web page. And instead of typing something in the bar at the top where you would put a URL, first, I see a list in Safari of my favorites. Well, that makes perfect sense because I might want to go to one of my favorites. But then right underneath that, I see suggestions. And you're like, where do these suggestions come from? So here's the tip. If you scroll down a little bit more, at the very bottom of the screen, you'll see a button that says Edit.
Yes.
Okay? If you tap on Edit, you will see that the things that are going to show up in suggestions, first of all, what is my order? I don't want my favorites first.
Yes, I like that. I know people can't see this, but I'm vouching that he's exactly what he's saying.
Underneath that, you can say, what do you want to show in suggestions? Do I want to show places that I frequently visit? That makes good sense because if I often go to this one page, that's a good suggestion for me, even if it's not a bookmark. Right. But another option here is shared with you, which means that the fact that 4 months ago, Brett, you sent me a text message or an email or something like that shares a website, it's going to pull that information in and it's going to be filtered in and incorporated within my suggestions. And so it goes back to what Michael was saying before.
Yeah.
Apple stuff just works, and it's a nice interface. You don't have to think about why this works well, but now I know that it does.
Right.
And if, on
Right.
the other hand, if you say that I like the suggestions, but I don't want to put in here the things that people text me because I have crazy friends and they text me crazy stuff. I only want my suggestions to be the places that I visited often.
Right.
This is how you do it. Go back to that edit thing and you can change it. So that's Safari, and there's other tips in
That's
here about how
fantastic.
you shared with you in photos and in news and everything else. But Apple has really, I think it makes perfect sense. People share things with you, and sometimes you act upon it immediately, but sometimes you just want to have it in the back of your brain or in your iPad or your iPhone's brain, so that in the future, when it's relevant, you have easy access to it. So it's a cool little feature.
I think to your point, you addressed this earlier, like the place that I've seen this mostly is in messages.
Sure.
And it seems like there was a place, maybe if I do a new or something like that I could find where people had shared specific photos. Like if I want to go, you and I share photos back and forth, and there typically is a place where I can go, oh, here it is. So if I tap into your name and
then
messages,
I scroll down.
and then here is all the photos that you have shared with me, or notes that we've shared amongst each
And
other.
links too.
Yeah, exactly. Now but that's just in messages, right? I mean, that's sort of the same
Well, that's
thing,
the way
like you
that it
said.
works in messages. But the point of that webpage and the Apple website is they show you how the shared with you idea is implemented differently in different apps. Another example, of course, is photos. In fact, literally just yesterday, Brett, you took some photos of a session that I was doing.
Right.
We look like idiots because we're wearing our Vision Pros and stuff like that.
Great.
And instead of just sharing 1 or 2 photos with me, what you did is you said, I took 50 photos or whatever it was, and I'm just going to share an album. And so now when I open up my Photos app, I actually have, besides my own photos, there's a section that's called Shared with You.
Right.
And it's got, here is the album that you shared
that's
with me,
great.
and I can tap and I can get to it. And so, you called it ABA Tech Show 2025.
I did.
I didn't even tell you this, but I threw some pictures in that shared album.
Nice, because
So
now we can
you
check.
look at it, 'cause
That's
you and I
so
went to
great.
dinner last night. Some of the pictures I took, I threw in that album, and so now they're going to show up on your thing as well. So there you go.
There's pictures of people taking pictures of each other. Okay, that's great.
very
There's
meta,
more
yes.
meta on that. Oh my goodness. Okay, we should probably wrap this up because we got to get to some other sessions and some other things. We got to go pet dogs. There's all kinds of things going on that we have to do. Jeff, this is so fun. I knew this was going to be fun. Bill, thank you again on the other side of the camera for being with us and for helping. We want to thank Michael for joining us as well. We'll talk with you next week, I guess. But boy, there's a whole lot that could happen in between now and then. But we got to get through this day and then the next weekend. Always fun talking. We'll talk with you next week for sure, Jeff.
Thanks, Brett. Bye-bye, everybody.